I've chosen Professor William Jarrett, who was Professor of Veterinary Pathology at the University of Glasgow, and probably was our leading comparative veterinary scientist of the last decade or so. You know, he's, in fact, many decades when we'll come to it. Bill, like all very, very talented people, was talented in many things, and from a very talented family, and from a dynasty of veterinary surgeons. There are three brothers from the west of Scotland. The eldest one was in veterinary practice in the west coast. Bill was an academic all his life, and his younger brother Oswald was a fantastic scientist as well. Bill entered the veterinary school in Glasgow, won all the prizes, went into research, and his first, I think, key advance was in a parasitic disease of cattle, particularly young calves, called lungworm. And this is a really bad disease because these sort of worms get into the lungs and destroy the lungs of calves. And he and a few colleagues created a vaccine. They understood the disease, they got to the bottom of it, so they created a vaccine. Commercially it was known as Dictol. But I think what it showed was an insight into understanding epidemiology, understanding disease, and how by taking, in the late 50s, 60s, an imaginative step of a vaccine against a parasite. Number two was in a disease called Feline Leukemia. And this is a very interesting discovery because the elder brother was noticing a large number of cats in the west of Scotland that were having diseases of the blood. Bill started to look at this from a pathological and an epidemiological point of view, and said the incidence was just way higher than it should be. And they just started to investigate it in great scientific investigation. And they identified the feline leukemia virus. And really, they led the world in these types of viruses. The work that they did spawned huge numbers of other researchers from a global perspective, and his work really sort of defined that whole area of virology. And for that particular work, he was awarded his Fellowship of the Royal Society. If you're a scientist, the pinnacle, I think, will either be Nobel Prize or a Fellow of the Royal Society. The learned people, the learned scientists, are elected by the Royal Society, a limited number each year. Number three is, in the Australian terms, as you would call it, it's a ripper. Okay, this is a ripper. And it goes again back to the west of Scotland. And in the west of Scotland you have lots of Highland cattle, and Bill and his colleagues identified that there was an extraordinary incidence of cancers of the stomach and the bladder in these Highland cattle. And the work showed that this was due to a papillomavirus. But what they showed, that if the virus got in the wrong place and had a cofactor, and that cofactor was a component of bracken. So the cattle that had these intestinal cancers and bladder cancer, they ate bracken. And it was the combination of a papillomavirus and bracken and being a particular type of cow that actually gave them cancer. And Bill published, I think it was a major article in Nature, and you know how important it was because there was a picture of a Highland cow on the Nature magazine. There's got to be a first. And I think those three things, to use your phrase, it's a good career. And actually I haven't touched on all the other things that he did as well. So I think from me as a veterinary scientist and a particular interest in this sort of area, I can think of no one better to be my favourite scientist. Yeah, clearly he did something for animals, and animal welfare is better for it. But he's much, much more than that. So he was able, I think, to transform certain areas and the whole of science has expanded. I think that, you know, he's one of these guys that would remember everything, instantly be able to give you a comment, would have an opinion on everything, absolutely everything. Passionate about his subject, loved teaching. His heartbeat was science. Bill was just a very rounded person. So, you know, he'd be good at music, he'd be good at sport, you know, he'd be good at conversation, good at the Times crossword, be able to sit and have a cup of tea with anyone, and just an excellent bloke.